you probably know, we have muted you all. We have a limited number of people on the call, so we will be able to unmute the lines when we open it up for questions, but to avoid any background noise and to get through some of the early presentation, we have put everybody on mute for now. If you do have a question along the way, or you can't hear us, or you have technical issues, please feel free to use the chat feature to let us know, and we'll be able to assist you as best as possible. So today, really, all of you have joined us for this conversation and this new request for partnerships that we have released through the Home for Good Funders Collaborative. Today, we're really going to focus on kind of why are we doing this. Research is a newer area of focus for us, but an exciting one. We're excited to partner with several groups around this funding opportunity, really talking about the larger system upgrade that this is embedded into and some of the background of our current system before really focusing specifically on this opportunity, and which is obviously what you're here mostly to hear, but we feel like the context is really essential because this is so integrated into a larger upgrade. We also obviously will be talking a lot about the application, the submission, the review, the selection, kind of the logistics of the opportunity. Before we do that, we did want to give you some context on who is involved in this project and really bringing in our partners to share some of the background on why we're doing this project in the first place. So before we kind of jump into the agenda, we did want to let you know who we are, which is the other piece of this conversation that is missing. So as some of you may know, the Home for Good Funders Collaborative is a group of public and private partners who have come together in 2011 to really help invest collectively in solutions to homelessness. That has taken many different forms over the years, but really has looked at how can we invest strategically private dollars and help leverage public dollars to do more together. The Funders Collaborative has always been a vehicle for opportunities and solutions. And so we always look for opportunities where we can bring in other partners with expertise, funds from different areas, really bring together private, public, and other experts to really build holistic solutions and holistic opportunities. And knowing that we obviously don't have all the answers, regularly put out funding opportunities to find people who have ideas, have solutions, have the capacity and interest to really partner with us on these on implementing change in Los Angeles County. And for this opportunity specifically, we've highlighted a few partners on the left. So United Way, which really represents the Home for Good Funders Collaborative overall, and is the administrator and the main entity in driving that table. We have the Homelessness Policy Research Institute, which some of you may be involved with as members, and I know we have several of the leadership members on the phone as well, including Gary Painter from USC. And that is a group of, similar to the Funders Collaborative, a group of researchers that have come together around this issue, who care about this issue, or engaged in this issue, who are creating an excellent research around this issue and are interested in collaborating more closely, both with each other and with the broader community that will implement a lot of the suggestions and best practices that are uplifted through your research. And last but never least, to the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, who's the main entity by which we are administering systems and solutions to end homelessness in Los Angeles, is a joint power of the city and the county of Los Angeles, and is, when we talk about the coordinated entry system, they are the administrators of our main system to address homelessness in Los Angeles. So this is quite the conglomeration of people and groups that are coming together to really help build a unique kind of research partnership that we think will be immensely valuable in addressing some of the underlying concerns of our system, and really also have incredible ramifications for other communities as well, and hopefully benefits for other communities as well, as we look at how our system and what we're learning can not only improve services and solutions in Los Angeles, but beyond, as we look at other communities and other systems that are also using similar tools or running into similar struggles. Before we kind of jump into the details of the RFP and really specifically kind of talk about some of the questions you may have, we did want to open it up because this is part of a broader conversation around our system to give you a sense of the system tool upgrade in relation to a broader system. So today we'll really focus a lot on this component, the tools, and we'll kind of dive into all the components that includes. And these, again, are the kind of the core partners related to this project. But we also know that it's important to note that this tool is part of a much broader system, that our system is more than just the survey, it's more than just the tools, it's how we work together. And it is part of a much larger system update to help enhance our overall service delivery in Los Angeles. And when we think about this larger system, at the core of that is really the LA Homelessness Services Authority, LAHSA, as we call it locally, and we have invited, and we're lucky to have Meredith Berkson on the phone. So I'm going to unmute your line, Meredith, so you can help give us some context about how this is fitting into a larger system conversation and upgrade, and how you all are a partner in this core planning group that's helping move forward this request for partnership. You should be unmuted, Meredith.
Yes. Hello. Can everybody
Hi.
hear me? Hello.
Yes.
Hi. Thank you for unmuting me, and thank you for having me. I will apologize in advance. There's probably some background noise you're hearing. LAHSA has our all-day staff meeting and training today, so I'm just stepping out of that because I really wanted to be able to join you all on this call and in launching this really critical effort. So thank you, Emily and United Way, for hosting, and for all our partners on the line. And thanks to those of you who are, dialing in to hear more about this awesome opportunity. Again, I'm Meredith Berkson. I am the, sorry, that's the ambient noise I was mentioning. But I am the Director of Policy and Systems at the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority. And as Emily said, we are really excited about this sort of CES Triage tool evaluation, and specifically the research model that'll be used, the continuous improvement model, because LAHSA is also undergoing a real sort of pivot in how we operate, and also in how we are critically looking at our coordinated entry system. We have some experience now, but our system, our coordinated entry system is relatively young, and we are very committed and really trying to pivot to look for opportunities in real time to make adjustments to the system using provider feedback and participant feedback, to start to really look at the way we improve our system, the way we create policy, the way we change policy in a different and new way. And we see this RFP and the research team that will be selected as an integral part of that effort. So LAHSA is currently undergoing a strategic planning effort with a nationally recognized consulting firm called Clutch Consulting, but also working closely with ICF and APT Associates. And we're essentially looking at each aspect of our system, so by population, but also system component, to identify opportunities to, like I said, improve in real time. We're not only is LAHSA committed to this sort of change management upgrade process, again, this evaluation will be at least very, very central to, but also how LAHSA can operate differently to support a more nimble system. So we've just conducted our final, well, not final, but a series of refinement workshops with key coordinated entry community-based partners to get input on how each of our systems, the family system, the transition age youth system, and the single adult systems are functioning, what challenges we're seeing, and what we all what our key stakeholders think about the direction we should be going as we try to improve these systems. So we've heard from providers, we've sought input from our Lived Experience Advisory Board and our Homeless Youth Forum of Los Angeles to get input on participant experience of the coordinated entry system. We know based on our ad hoc committee work, and that those were two sort of key drivers into this RFP, to look at the tool more critically and recognize that we need a tool that is responsive to a changing population, but also to the the nuances of each specific subpopulation within the homeless population. So the ad hoc committee on Black people experiencing homelessness, the ad hoc committee on women experiencing homelessness, the DV task force, LGBT advocates. We've really heard that there's a need to look at the tool and ensure that it's capturing the unique vulnerabilities of Los Angeles, the folks experiencing homelessness here in Los Angeles County. And also, as Emily said, well, this is a very important, obviously, local effort that we're committed to, the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority and within our continuum of care, that we also feel like this has a lot of value for the rest of the nation, really, as they look to LAHSA as the largest continuum of care providing services to people experiencing homelessness. How these findings related to the triage tool may create opportunities for other continuums to undergo similar processes and hopefully similar improvements. So with that, I will stop and say that, again, we're just very excited about this process. We're committed to working very closely with the research partner that's selected. And we are in the process, actually, of hiring an analyst at LAHSA who will be the liaison. This is a 3-year project, obviously, so someone who can really be that intermediary between the research team and the LAHSA systems team as we make changes in real time. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions or to leave it at that. And Emily, if I left anything out, please let me know.
Thank you, Meredith, and thank you for stepping out to have this call. Really appreciate that, and all of the context. I think it's really important, and we'll give a little background on the history of coordinated entry system locally. We do know we have some researchers that are not just from LA, which we're excited to see, but it is important that you all know how much this is part of a larger effort. And one of the main reasons it's called a request for partnerships is that we are really looking at both your ideas, but also really just interested in bringing on board a researcher who can be a partner through this broader process with us. And yeah, the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, as you saw their logo at the top, is a core planning partner. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, what that means, and some of the other complementary aspects. But Meredith touched on a lot of those as well. Thank you, Meredith. And we're happy to take questions, obviously, along the way, so please feel free to use the chat. But we will be kind of moving through some of the background and then kind of opening up for more general questions after that, since we feel like we'll address some of those, hopefully some of your questions along the way. So really, as we kind of move through this system and this process, you'll see in the RFP really highlighted kind of some of broader goals around our system upgrade. These are 3 themes that came out. I wouldn't say these are necessarily specific goals, but these are really what kind of some of the things that we're looking to do through this broader effort. Advance equity, as Meredith mentioned, there's been some efforts around some of our ad hoc committees locally, ad hoc committee on Black people experiencing homelessness, ad hoc committee on women in homelessness. All of these came up with some great reports and recommendations that are available on the RFP website that you can reference. And really this question of how can we continue to advance equity and ensure that is part of our system through and through. Improving system flow, that really, we want to make sure that people don't get stuck, and part of that is of talking about our tools as we look at how can we ensure people are set up for success. And last, increasing confidence. I think we have a system, we have a platform that a lot of people are engaged in, and it's always our goal that people feel that they have a sense of agency in that system, that they have confidence that the system is doing what it's supposed to do, and that people are being helped in the way that they're supposed to be helped. And so a lot of that is also ensuring that our system is building confidence of all those that work in it and all the clients that are served by it. And really, when we talk about the system, we did want to take a pause and let you know what that is. As we saw more and more RCPs come through, we realized that this might be a new area for many people, both Los Angeles' homeless service system, but also even for those researchers locally who may not be engaged in the system. So we wanted to give you really brief history. There are immense amount of resources that we put on the website and linked to through the RFP that we hope you'll dive more deeply into. But we just wanted to give you a sense of kind of how this started, because we think that is so core of the approach that we're hoping to take with this upgrade. The values and the principles behind CES, Coordinated Entry System, when they were launched, are something that we want to maintain. And so to help us kind of kick off this effort and talk a little bit about what really it took to get started, we were excited to bring our Managing Director of Homeless Initiatives here at United Way, Chris Coe, who was really there when it was baked and born, and has been along for the entire history of CES. To Meredith's point, it is not a very old system, but it's a very interesting system. So we wanted to give you a bit of background before getting into what we want to change about it. So Chris, I'm unmuting your line, and you were able to, give some background, and excited to have you again on the phone to join us for this conversation.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. I also have Carter Hughley with me, who's also starting the job as our new Director of Homeless Initiatives. You'll all meet him as well. But Emily and I will tag team on this, and there's a broader document, like Emily mentioned, that is hosted on the webpage to go into a little more detail. I think the biggest thing we wanted to stress and even show, because what you have in front of you is a image of what it looked like. So we're excited about this moment because we feel like it's a little bit of returning to the heart of how we created the Coordinated Entry System, which was made by people on the ground. Carter and I are actually at the launch of another system design session to redesign the employment and homelessness intersection. And that is also being done with that same spirit of how do we have case managers, people, lived experience. I think how we described it was people who every day interact with people going through the system, designing the system that they want to see, and also lifting up the barriers that they face. So this started almost 6 years ago now in Skid Row with a group of people who are trying to understand what would it look like to make systematic allocations of resources. At that time, everything was done via contract. So if you can imagine a world in which all the housing resources were given out kind of program by program, building by building. So that often meant a waiting list at each building versus any centralized or systematic way to do it. And so that was the genesis of it. So as we talk about continuous improvement, as we talk about having more lived experience and people on the ground informing the process, it's an attempt to get back at what had made the Coordinated Entry System development process so dynamic. And on the bottom, you'll see a reiteration of that purpose, that it was a lot through experimentation and combined with other questions and surveys over time. There's been an evolution of what's happened over the course of this. So even though it's been a short period of time since the existence of any centralized system, there has also been notable shifts during that time. And so even since then, this used to be a 2 or 3 part survey and assessment that have been now combined into one. Part of a common misunderstanding about the Coordinated Entry System is that the VI-SPDAT in its current form has always been the engine of the Coordinated Entry System. It has actually, the VI-SPDAT itself has shifted over time, but also CES started with an entirely different tool altogether. At the beginning, that the original community design team actually swapped out for a variety of reasons that you can reference on the CES history document that's hosted on the website. Since then, as we mentioned, the survey has been consolidated into a much longer form, which now combines HUD's intake questions, some of the preferencing, eligibility requirements, and all of that is now one. So now there's a question on what does it look like to do a more progressive engagement? What does it look like to split this up, which was actually where it began originally. The last thing I'll say in this section is that although the focus of this obviously is the assessment, I think it's important to state that the Coordinated Entry System creation was about much more than the assessment. That's the orange slide that Emily had before about the system being much more than the tool. There are a few things that are notable about what changed in the course of the creation of the coordinated entry system by virtue of it being centralized. That meant that we were able to achieve full coverage of the county, that now there's technically someone leading the work to coordinate resources or end homelessness in every area of the system. For example, in the central region, previous to CES, there used to only be a coalition around Skid Row, Hollywood, and East LA. Since then, and when we gave the charge to create common regional contracting, that meant that now there are coalitions in Silver Lake, Echo Park, the MacArthur Park, K-Town area, Mid-Wilshire. All of those have been results of a more regionalized outcome and coverage mapping that occurred from the development of the coordinated entry system. Last slide. In the process of this too, when we developed the tools, we at United Way focused heavily on the creation of the coordinated entry system for adults. It's important to note that there was a preceding system for families that actually used a different tool, and then a different assessment tool, and then the coordinated entry system for youth. As that was being created, they actually took the VI SPDAT, and Eric Rice and his team at USC helped to inform the next step tool, which was a variant of the VIY SPDAT that was created for our area and then went on to be used even more broadly. And then there was a time where the tools and the assessments were then consolidated across the various systems, and now they also all use the VI SPDAT in some form as a common tool, which was part of the reason it was suggested by the teams. They wanted to strike this balance between specialization for population and standardization, and an ability to allocate and triage across the various system types and population types, which will be a tension that we still face as we go through this assessment now. As part of that, something else that happened was that by having a central system, we're able to have common terms and shared resources in a way we didn't have before. So housing navigators, retention specialists, outreach coordinators, regional flex funds, all of that is actually the result of some of the creation of this. So there is a system implication as you think about how we adapt or alter, use the triage or assessment tool at the heart of it. There are implications beyond just the use of it. You know, the administration of it also can have implications broadly to how teams and programs and agencies work together. Which brings us to the final slide here, which again is a visualization of the tool itself, the survey packet itself, if you have a chance to look at it. I think what we'd ask every prospective applicant to do, I think there are a lot of presumptions about how the tool is scored, and a lot of the logic behind the tool that's not easy to understand at first glance. And there are questions that are intentionally redundant as a way to gauge understanding in different ways in case someone didn't understand it before. So some of the redundancy is intentional. Some of the language and some of the funny sounding language was intentionally tested by the original work code team. Some of the questions that are grouped together and scored together are intentionally done so in that way. Some of the original sequencing was done so intentionally. So there is greater intentionality than might be seem obvious, but again, this is about improving on that and adding another layer of intentionality and seeing what that next iteration looks like. The final thing I'll say about this is that the VI SPDAT also gets mistaken for the VI, which are two different instruments, which was also considered by the team as one of the prospective triage tools selected. The VI, a lot of times people use shorthand to say the VI test for morbidity, who's most likely to die on the street. The VI SPDAT does not primarily test actually for who's most likely to die on the street. It is a combination of different areas around risk factors, history of housing and homelessness, socialization and daily functioning wellness category is primarily taken from the VI, but it is a portion of the broader VI SPDAT and also correlates to a more clinical SPDAT, which has an administrative record portion, as well as observation questions. So this is just a quick primer to say there's a lot in the design of it and also how it's shifted over time that we would love for the researcher to be fully aware of, but also to continue on in the spirit of that, to know that the system has always been about continuous improvement. And it's been a long time since we've made such a major investigation into it, but we're certainly excited by that idea because that was always at the heart of it. So I'll turn it back over to Emily if there's anything you want to add or to take us to the next section.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, this was supposed to be an incredible snapshot of a very long history and a lot of effort in building a new system. But we wanted to give you that snapshot so you could get pointed into the right direction. So if you go to the website, homeforgoodla.org/grant-seekers with an S, there is a copy of each of the system tools that we utilize in Los Angeles currently, a more detailed description of the history of the tool and the system, and other kind of resources related to kind of accessing org code articles and other things that will give you a sense of kind of that background. Because to Chris's question, there was a lot of thought put behind these tools and a lot of effort to continue to evolve them around our system. And we looked at this upgrade process as continuing that spirit so that we can continue to enhance our system. And this is one big moment for that, but something that we hope that has always been part of our system and that we hope to continue to be part of our system going forward. So this was to give you a little context on the coordinated entry system at large, which is much larger than the tool itself. The survey packets, which are often misunderstood as or synonymous with something called the VI SPDAT locally, and that is used in other communities, but has evolved and changed already over time. And it's something that regardless, is still very core to our system. And so knowing that there's this fundamental element, we wanted to make sure to bring this forward, and there was great interest from our philanthropic partners to support this effort as part of this larger upgrade. And really, that's where you come in. We started with a research-backed tool. We've continued to enhance it based on data and information we're receiving by utilizing the tool and continue to enhance it. And that is our goal through this, is to partner with research in a formal way to really test and try what would make our tool stronger and therefore our system stronger. And so as we kind of dig in, this is really where, again, you come in. So we're looking specifically right now at the triage tool, and the researcher will really partner with these three core entities: the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, Homelessness Policy Research Institute, United Way, and many of the other kind of leading tables around our community, and really embark on this multi-year effort to really study and strengthen the assessment, administration, and application of LA's homeless system tools as part of this broader system. And we didn't take this, separate from the community. Just as Chris was sharing, our system started with the community first. Frontline workers were the ones who really helped us make decisions in the early days, deciding our direction, deciding what tools we were going to use, understanding that they needed to work together to come up with what would work best across all of their organizations and clients. And so when this idea came up to help invest in this triage tool research, we really wanted to make sure that, one, the research side has a similar community-focused feel, but also that we, even as we drafted the RFP, we're doing the same. So we put it out to many different tables across the community. Here are a couple of examples of some high-level questions. We asked several different stakeholder groups, folks with some of our lived experience advisory boards in Los Angeles, our funders group, our systems leaders, our public entities. We had a brainstorm with a cross-section of a lot of different sectors of Los Angeles working around this issue and around this issue. And we put out the charge for these questions, and through that, really consolidated some of the priority areas into 3 big buckets. The triage tool is really more than just the questions themselves, though that's a critical component. It's also about the administration and application. So you'll hear and see these 3 buckets used a lot in the RFP and throughout this conversation. But really, this is really consolidating all of the feedback that we heard and putting them into categories. There are more detailed information about some of the feedback and comments we heard at those tables, and more information about who we engaged through this RFP process on the website as well, if you're curious to get some of that background. But we wanted you to know that this wasn't created in a vacuum, that this was created in concert with a lot of different groups, and including and especially frontline folks who are living and breathing this system every day. And so from that, we've created these 3 big buckets: assessment, administration, application. Assessment being the questions, the tool itself, how the order, the length, the language we use. To Chris's point, there was a lot of intention behind that in the early days, and we want to maintain that. Administration, this is kind of the biggest category that has started to raise questions and has come up in a lot of these ad hoc reports, is really what is the best way that we can get the best responses as possible, the most accurate responses as possible when we're administering the tool. So how much does it matter, and in what ways can we affect who, when, where, and how the tool is administered? You'll get to some of the questions in a later slide, and that are also featured on the RFP. And then the last piece is one that I think gets brought up a lot, but is one component of this larger effort, is about the application, the scoring. What do we do with the responses once we have them? And that is one of the goals of the system. That is one component of this triage tool upgrade. And really, when we're looking at the RFP and interested groups, ultimately this is what it came to, is this document that is available online, and I hope you all have had a chance to start to read and dig into, that really we're interested in investing in a multi-year research, design, testing, and evaluation in partnership with community stakeholders and a lot of key critical groups, like some of the ones we engaged through the input process, to partner on this, what we've been calling continuous improvement, but it's really about kind of social innovation. How can we test and try and keep iterating together, utilizing your research skills and background as the basis for that and those decisions. We have opened it up to all researchers. We would love researchers from outside of Los Angeles to bring unique perspectives, but we also understand the logistics of this kind of study definitely require someone locally to coordinate more closely with our groups. And so we have opened it up to all applicants. We would love, a mix of people to apply, but we also have specified that we would like a local partner to be involved in the research team. That is also something that we know. We know researchers have different specialties, and we also know that this is cuts across a lot of specialties. And so we are not requiring groups to partner, but we would love to see some research teams come in that have that mix of specialties that can allow for a really robust research study in partnership with these groups. So you'll see through the applicant cover sheet that we have asked about kind of your research team, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to come from one institution. We also, as we mentioned, and we're going to kind of keep repeating, is really what are the underlying hopes of the approach that we take. The CES system was really built with a frontline approach, really built with clients at the center, and always with the intention of continuing to evolve. And so we would like some of the same spirit built into this project. And so we do really want this to be a collaboration, that we're asking for your initial ideas, we're asking for your direction, but we are not, at the end of the day, whatever researcher will be selected and whatever research project will be selected, it'll still evolve from there. That the product that you propose will not be the final version, that we understand that we need to continue to have those conversations. The last piece is, that this is really perspective and piloting focused. And so at the end of the day, we want to get to a place where we are early and often piloting, testing, and evaluating, that we understand that you may have to look back into the data, back into the system to learn. And from that information, we'll build pilots and build opportunities or build recommendations, even straight off the bat. But really, most of this is looking forward, that it is not necessarily a deep statistical analysis alone. That could be a component, but we wanted to make it clear that at the end of the day, this is going to be about piloting, testing, and evaluating. And whatever it takes to get there, I think you guys know best, but we wanted to make it clear that that is the direction and the goal. And throughout your questions, throughout the RFP, you'll see questions that are more focused on kind of your future activities and really focusing on that piloting piece. I'm not going to read these, but these are pulled straight from the RFP on pages 4 and 5 of the RFP. So there are the 3 categories. We highlighted some priority questions. So as I mentioned, we went out to the community, asked a whole bunch of people, what do you want to keep about the system? What's working? What do we need to look at addressing that may be a concern? And from all of those conversations, really pulled out these large level questions around what are the things that our system is grappling with? What are the questions that we don't necessarily know the answers to? And what are the things that really research can help us dive deeper into? And so each of the categories you'll see on pages 4 and 5 have specific questions. We understand these are a lot of questions and these are a diversity of questions. Our hope and goal through this this request for partnerships is that someone can help us really significantly address a number of these questions. These are not the only questions that may come up. We also want to leave space and it says it in the RFP, that we don't know what we don't know. So if there's another question that is critical that we're missing, we would love your thought partnership on. But we wanted you to know that these were based on a series of questions and have come up repeatedly. These are the main issues our community over and over and over, no matter what level you sit on or no matter your perspective into the system, these are the things that are coming up for them and that they don't have the answers to. So assessment, there's a couple different pieces about balancing specificity and standardization, and that has been something that increasingly as we meet the needs of special populations, how do we ensure that we're still speaking a common language? There's also a lot of question about how are we presenting the questions in a way that allows for accurate responses, since this is so far been a self-report survey. There is a question, obviously, as you'll see later, about what is the role of other kinds of data into this system as we build out kind of our other data systems and the other pieces of our system that collect information. How do those relate? We also, obviously, as I mentioned, administration is a huge question, the who, when, where, how of our system. So really understanding how it matters who is administering the tool and when it is administered. This has come up in particular around special populations, which is a broad term, but means a variety of different groups. But these in particular, people who have particular vulnerabilities or have been identified through these ad hoc reports as potentially being underrepresented or underserved. So, for example, one of our big priorities being equity, that people experiencing homelessness that are Black, there is a sense and in some cases an understanding that the system and the tools may not be addressing or meeting their full vulnerabilities. And how do we address that? So these are some of the big level questions. And then last, obviously, you've seen application. These are the more data wonky side of the things of how are we scoring, how are we connecting that to other data systems, how are we ensuring, and then the other piece of it that is a little less data wonky that we would love is that about that increasing confidence. How do we ensure that the tool is not just something that we collect, but is actionable, that provides agency to people on the front lines to do something today while someone is still working towards housing. And so that is through all of this, I think that is what we're hoping comes is that the tool is used in multiple ways, that it is providing support and increasing confidence, increasing equity, and enhancing the solutions for people that it's meant to serve. So you can dig through those questions, but essentially those are our hope, is that we can really address some of those big level questions that our community is grappling with. And at the end of the day, you all will submit your proposals, and we will be reviewing against some of the criteria that are listed in the RFP. The RFP on page 7 lists a series of criteria. We are really looking at this from a holistic approach. So, we are not necessarily putting bigger emphasis on certain criteria over others. We are hoping for a really well-rounded partnership, that it is going to be a mix of your qualifications and experience and your ability to kind of get this off the ground, as well as your approach and your design. I think those are obviously the two biggest buckets and the major buckets of the RFP questions, and because those are kind of the focus of our review. We, through the Funders Collaborative, always use a mix of reviewers who are funders from public and private entities, as well as those with experience. So research community members who are not applying or not engaged in this process, who can add that research lens. Those who are engaged in the system at that actual user level, who can actually supply us a different perspective on your application. So it'll be a mix of people, and then coming together to build a recommendation for the Funders Collaborative and the core planning team of LASA, the Homelessness Policy Research Institute, and United Way, to really come around and make a selection. And then ultimately, whoever is selected will find out as you'll see, in December. And then we will move to really begin contracting and ultimately launching in early 2020 with your proposal for the first 12 months. It's one of the reasons we ask for your first 12 months. I think one of the questions that came up and that we're happy to address, we're going to dig through some of the key questions that have come up already, is really about how much of my full plan should I provide beyond the 12 months. So in your overall narrative, we would love to get a sense of kind of the direction, the scope, the overall goal and focus of your project. But we've only asked for the first 12 months of a more detailed plan, because we want to understand more of your direction and more of the details. But we also understand that this is a multi-year project. It's going to evolve even after your application. And so we want to know the full kind of arc and scope in the narrative, but we only asked for 12 months of more detail. We're going to dig through some of these FAQs, and then obviously you all are more than welcome to ask questions that are not listed on this. All of the answers that we give today to these questions and others will be posted on the website. There is a frequently asked questions document that we'll be regularly updating. Our goal is that every researcher, every potential applicant can benefit from everybody else's questions and responses. So we'll be ongoing updating that document on the website. So beyond all of the amazing resources that we've added for this RFP in particular, we encourage you to keep checking back, because there will be updated information ongoing until the submission date. So feel free to put your questions in the chat. We will have a brave moment where we open the phone lines in a minute. And before we do that, I would ask everyone to self-mute as well. But before we do that, I'm just going to run through these, and I think we've addressed some of them, but I'll just reiterate them. So one of the obviously questions is we have a lot of priority questions that are listed in the RFP on those pages 4 and 5. How will we prioritize? And really the question will be about kind of your overall, again, approach, design, and addressing a significant number of these questions. We also understand that your research may not address specifically that question, but you may have ideas, you may have thoughts, you may have, that because all of these questions are so interconnected that you want to share. And so please feel free, and we actually encourage, it will not be a deciding factor, but it'll help make your application more competitive, to provide us with, kind of your overall thoughts, and then drill into your specific component that you can help specifically design and pilot. Related to that, one of the other kind of big questions that had come up and that we definitely want to address is kind of what is the money for and what is the money not for. So we provided in the RFP kind of a list of potential uses and activities related to the money. So one of the major things we want all of you to communicate to all researchers who might apply is that the money that we note in a couple of things. One is the money that we note in the RFP, the up to 1.5 million over the 3 years, will be distributed over the 3 years, so will not be upfront. But we're curious for you to let us know how it will, how would it be best to distribute it, but knowing that it'll be distributed. The second is that this is a collaboration, and everything we do is a collaboration. And so this funding is coming from a couple different sources. So all the selected research team will be contracted with a couple different funders. All of the funders that are involved, though, are critical core planners of this project. And so the goal is that they will be able to, everybody's going to be coordinating around how to ensure that is streamlined. We're all expecting the same outcomes. They're all part of a larger project and portfolio, but we wanted you to know that at the end of the day, there will be a couple of contracts coming to whoever is selected. And then lastly, and I think most valuably and most importantly, is that the 1.5 isn't the extent of the investment into this opportunity. I think as Meredith shared, even at the top, there's an immense amount of work and investment already happening on the larger systems upgrade. For example, LASA is hiring a staff person to be dedicated to this overall upgrade effort. And so that level of kind of dedicated staff, access to data through that staff person will be immensely valuable, even though it's not dollars coming through the contract. And then secondly with that is also that the 1.5 is specifically for the research component. But when it comes to the piloting, wherever there's an external investment in a partner who may be piloting, we understand that it's a vital component, but we also do not feel like we feel like we need to invest in the capacity of those organizations to actually be a pilot partner for you, and that would not be a component of your 1.5. So it's a little bit of a balance. Your kind of pilot, your design, your evaluation, all of those kind of, all of the pieces that goes into that will be part of the 1.5. Additional complementary components related to the actual execution of pilots with partners, so any expenses that would go from that partner, was something that we're looking at funding through additional funding from private philanthropy. So we wanted to make that clear because we know it is not an insignificant amount for us, but it's also not, with research and with adding some, additional partners and pilots, we do know that can add up. And so it's not our intention to take from the research fund to pay for those additional pieces. And we're happy to provide more specificity on that. I feel like people are going to have questions. And then, related to that, I think, who is the core planning team? We mentioned it several times in the RFP, but we wanted to make it especially clear that as we look at this project, it is a partnership. You'll be working with a lot of different stakeholder groups, but most centrally, you'll be working with the LA Homeless Services Authority, the Homelessness Policy Research Institute, and United Way, who will be hand in hand with this project to, for multiple reasons. But I think one huge part of it is that it'll be a huge benefit to the research community to already have those kind of connections, have that thought partnership, have that opportunity to leverage the relationships we already hold and the roles we already hold in the sector to really ensure that access, opportunity, additional complementary investments are all kind of coordinated alongside of you, and that's not necessarily your responsibility. And so we wanted to make sure that this is done hand in hand with research because you're so vital to this project. We also understand that your role doesn't have to be the full extent of the upgrade, and that we all need to play a role in that piece of the project. And then lastly, I think we talked a little bit about the review and the selection already, but just to reiterate, we will, as soon as the submissions come through, we will be putting them out to volunteer reviewers. They will all be provided a guide with those criteria that are listed in the RFP to help guide that conversation. And then we'll be pulling in additional information and additional context to help really round out that review and be able to select based on kind of the full scope of both your application and the full understanding of the review team to be able to make a really positive selection that we can feel good about moving forward with. I'm gonna take a deep breath. So I just ran through because I wanted to leave space for your questions. We wanted to leave about 30 minutes, so we're pretty on track. We're happy to answer, we're happy to keep talking about questions we think you may have, but we also feel like it might be more valuable for you to just ask us questions. So if you have questions, please note them in the chat. If you're at a computer, obviously you can type it into the chat feature and we'll be able to answer any questions. We will tell you if it's a question that we don't necessarily have an answer to, and we're happy to follow up. But this would be a great opportunity to get some of those early questions out. We also, in a moment, we're going to start with the chat, but in a moment we'll get brave with the phone lines. But I'm going to once again ask everybody, while people are typing in the chat, please self-mute so that when I unmute all lines, we're able to hear the folks who have a question to ask to the group. So please self-mute. Anybody can type into the chat still, and we are going to open the phone lines. If it is, fair warning, if it's a disaster, I'm going to close them back up and we'll switch back to chat. But there's a limited number of us, so I think we can get brave. All right. Again, feel free to type into the chat and we'll respond to those. And we're about to open all the phone lines, so please self-mute on whatever phone or computer device you're on so that we can make sure that everybody can hear the questions as they're asked. So everyone who has an active line should be able to speak at this time. If you would like to ask a question, please let us know your name and who you represent, just so we can have a sense of that as we kind of go through the questions. Please feel free to ask your questions now.
While someone musters up the courage to speak, we'll start with Scott Ashwood's question that he typed into the chat. Would you provide more information about the expectation for diversity and equity inclusion? And Scott's asking particularly relative to researcher qualifications. So is the focus on the organization's commitment or on diversity within the research team?
Great, thank you. This comes up a couple times over, as you can see, because it is such a core value of our system and goal of this system upgrade. And as I think one thing you're probably directly referencing is the optional tool that is available to download as a template and upload as part of your submission. So there is a tool that, for those of you who haven't looked, that's okay. It's one of the attachments. It is optional. We understand that this may not be data that you're necessarily collecting and that you may not be able to provide. So we wanted to ensure that that wasn't a deterrent for people to apply. At the same time, I think it's a great tool to be able to showcase your team's commitment and understanding of diversity, equity, inclusion within your own team. And so we've asked that if you are a research team that is multiple institutions or entities coming together for a single application, that you focus that piece on your actual research team, so just the members of your team, understanding that it could be way too overwhelming to do your entire organization. If you are a single entity requesting funds and applying, we do ask that you look organizationally. For research, for academic institutions, we know this could be a little harder, so we would ask you to focus on what is a reasonable amount of people related to your direct projects management, and be able to provide that. That is an optional document. At the same time, I think one of the other pieces I would love to know is that there are a couple questions in the narrative where we ask about your kind of understanding of equity and your previous approach to research related to equity. And that can involve both your organization's kind of understanding and approach internally, as well as your external research work. And then the other component is obviously specific to this project. We've asked some questions related to implicit explicit bias and some other things that really would require some level of understanding of equity, and some sense of your commitment to that value. and how you would apply that value to this project. So we're trying to make it so that we know this is something that is being asked regularly by funders now. It is something that we hold as a value and want to ensure is part of this. That attachment is optional. The questions related to your understanding, your approach, how you would apply it to this project are required questions on the narrative. So in some way, shape, or form, you'll have to address the question of how your organization, how your research, how your team, comes to this question, and how you guys are already looking at it, both internally and through your research.
Yeah, so it's not one question at the expense of the other, and the reviewers will be looking holistically across the set of your commitment, your team, your past experiences, your future plans. And so in a perfect world, someone is strong on every single one of those domains, but we understand that people will probably be stronger on one than others, and the reviewers will look across the set of them.
Yeah. And one thing I want to note, when we ask for experience and approach, that section of the RFP on page 5, I think it's related to this question. We do specify also that experience and qualifications are demonstrated both in past research, such as studies and reports, as well as internal organizational values, reflections, processes, and actions. So we understand that maybe your research hasn't centered on equity, but maybe some of the ways that you've exhibited your commitment to equity, fall internally. And so please feel free, as much as I know that, as much as the showcasing kind of the studies and the evaluations you've done is critical to this, we also, if there are relevant components of your organization's work, internally and externally, that are relevant, we would love to know that as well. And they can definitely demonstrate experience and expertise in those areas. Any other questions that folks have on the phone about the RFP, particular questions that are unclear? If you want to know our motivations behind something, I am not a public entity, so I get to share some of the background in a more detailed way. So any questions on kind of what were we thinking behind a certain question or anything like that? As people quickly reference their RFPs and think of some additional questions, I will flag other pieces. Again, type in the chat, cut me off with your question. I'll just flag that the attachments, there are several templates posted online. So we do have a template for the diversity, equity, inclusion worksheet, which is optional. The unoptional attachments are the application cover sheet and the proposed timeline, which both have templates. The last required attachment does not have a template, which is your budget. We toyed back and forth with that since it will be a little harder to have some comparison, but because you all might have a very different approach, because you might be asking different questions, because your organizations work in different ways and we're on a limited timeline, we wanted to make sure that you could provide a budget that was comprehensive, reflective of your project, and that ultimately we decided did not involve a template. So please feel free to provide a budget, an understandable budget within the scope of the RFP that outlines really kind of your cost estimate. We also know that, again, this is a multi-year project and it may evolve. And so we would like to know as much detail as you can provide, but we also understand that it may change over time. So we can work through that process as we get there with whoever is selected.
It's hard for me to believe that a group as smart as the research community would have no questions. So please ask whatever is what's on your mind, even if it's not a question, thoughts.
Love your
We're
question.
going to leave it open for 30 more seconds because we want to just make triple sure, but in 20 seconds, we're going to close the Q&A.
Otherwise, I mean, I'm an extrovert. I can just keep talking. But nobody wants that. So I would love to answer your questions more specifically. Oh, thank you, Scott. Appreciate it. What do you mean by key community tables? Great question. I think one reference point you might look to is who we engaged in the input process to build the RFP. So we went through a series of tables that are kind of key stakeholder groups of the homeless service sector in Los Angeles to really help shape the RFP, and those tables are listed on one of the documents that's uploaded. We would have put it all in the RFP, but there was a lot. So we kind of condensed it and we used a lot of attachments and resources that we've uploaded to the website. So key community tables include our core public sector stakeholders. So our Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, our homelessness initiative here in Los Angeles County, obviously the folks like United Way, those folks that are kind of working in the public sector space, as well as those who are engaging in it as a private entity like United Way. Our Funders Collaborative obviously is a critical table. And then we also have groups that are closer to the ground. So we have a coordinated tree system policy table. We have a couple of those actually. We have some regional team tables. So this is just to signify that we would like it to be community driven. We'd like community tables to be integrated into the planning and conversation. Again, some of those are listed on that document and in other spaces. But we would like, even if you don't know who they are, and as you kind of research, you might find the names of some of those entities, but even like who would you engage? Like folks with lived experience, frontline workers. So don't feel like you have to call out exactly who. The other side of this is that our core planning team will be a critical partner in defining what tables should be engaged when, knowing a lot of the background around the larger systems upgrade. And so we'll be able to help with that as well. But again, back to basics. If you look on the website and find that document, it'll be a good starting point. And if you haven't been on the website, again, I'm just going to make that plug again. I highly recommend it. There is an immense amount of documents that have been linked to, and we feel like many of them, if not all of them, are critical for applicants to read through before applying. In particular, I'll call out that CES Triage Tool Upgrade Stakeholder Input Summary, which is essentially all of the notes that have led to this RFP and list those tables. Brief history of CES, our coordinated entry system in LA, hugely valuable, more detail, and such an underpinning for this RFP that I think everybody should absolutely read. Obviously, there's links to the triage tools themselves, so if you haven't been exposed to those, please do that. And as you kind of dig through, you may have questions about how it was shaped, how it was formed, and referencing back to that history document, as well as the some of the articles we linked to through OrgCode, who is the organization that created the VI SPDAT, which is a component of our survey and is used in a lot of communities. So there's some great reference points there.
Hello, this is Lisa Meredith. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, I've been driving, which is why I couldn't type in any questions, but I'm now stopped. So I just wanted to ask a little bit about, you mentioned that there might be complementary resources for the community in addition to the research funds. To what extent can applicants assume that some of the logistical aspects of helping to coordinate and connect with these community tables and individuals who are part of these groups would be something we can count on, as opposed to trying to do this solely on the research side?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I can say pretty confidently that you can rely on that. I mean, we have all committed to this project in a very deep way, including, like I mentioned, LASA has created a dedicated staff person for this project. So that kind of coordination connection piece, I think you can assume will be there. I think the part that every researcher should still embed and, as part of their design is still that, ultimately facilitating those conversations, being in those spaces takes your time and effort. And so ensuring that you allow for, kind of your use of those spaces to still be in your budgets and your plans, that we can provide, the entryway, and we manage many of those tables. And so we can provide spaces on agendas and all of those pieces. But you're going to obviously need to still be in those spaces with us in a deep way. And so we would encourage you to still budget time and space for that. But yes, absolutely. The connections to those conversations, to those key tables will all be there. And then you can assume some level of kind of data support and additional community connection through LASA, as well as you should assume that you'll be spending a lot of time with United Way, LASA, and the Homelessness Policy Research Institute as part of this as well.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Lisa, you win our award for bravest voice on the call. We will keep it open again for 20 more seconds if anyone wants to follow on and ask a question out loud. Hearing none, I will, before Emily wraps up, I just wanted to reiterate our thanks to the RFP committee for really diving in and putting input into this. I know the research community also submitted comments through various channels and anonymized it so that we could make sure that we still received input without biasing decisions. So thank you to HPRI for facilitating that. And a huge set of thanks to Emily for pulling this together. This was a very tight window, and it was an urgent need and opportunity that Emily worked incredibly hard to. If you go through the documents that she mentioned, you will see that there were a lot of different opinions on how this should come together, and I thought she did a beautiful job in capturing the heart and spirit of those various viewpoints while also asking you how you'd handle that. So thank you, Emily, for helping steer this to this point. And with that, I will turn it to you to tell us what's next.
Thanks, Chris. And yeah, thank you everybody for joining the conversation today. We are still open for questions, so if you have a burning question that you didn't get to, obviously we'll stay on the line a little longer, but you can always submit it to rfp@unitedwayla.org. That will be your go-to to submit all questions and to ultimately submit your application. We ask that you submit everything, all questions through November 12th. That is really only it's a couple days before the submission deadline, and that is to ensure that we can respond to you, because that is two people, myself and Tammy, who get to be responding to you on those RFP lines. So please ask us any and all questions. Again, we'll post all the responses and questions onto the FAQ so that you can all benefit from everybody else's questions. And lastly, obviously submit your applications by November 14th. We will be submitting by email to that same email address, rfp@unitedwayla.org. We do not accept, thank goodness, hard copies. So please just email everything. We ask that you submit it in your original format, so Word, Excel. It's a little unusual, but we think that it actually helps the review process be a little bit easier, and that we can then, when we get to the point of contracting, have something to work from, that we don't have to ask you for additional information. So that is to everyone's benefit if you turn it in its original format. Please, 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 there are some page limits on some of the pieces. We did want to flag that we have page limits and guides for a reason, and so we would love you to stick to those, but also that we understand that you may want to include visuals or charts to help us better understand what you're saying, and we're not counting that in the page limits. So please feel free to add things that will add value to your application and understanding for reviewers that may be beyond narrative. And lastly, again, we're just going to be working through the review process into December and letting everybody know before the holidays where we landed in terms of selection, and then moving through to contract and start the conversation more, directly with whoever is selected. We are really excited to see what applications come in. This is a super important project for Los Angeles and our work to end homelessness, and we deeply appreciate the research community's already support in better understanding solutions to our system, and this is an exciting way that we can, partner directly to keep doing that. So we are excited to see your applications. We are excited to see whatever questions come up after this call, and just want to stay connected as we move forward in really addressing the challenge here in Los Angeles and continuing to learn in Los Angeles and being a lab for innovation for other communities to learn from as well. So thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate our Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, our Homelessness Policy Research Institute folks for joining us. And just from us at United Way, we just thank you deeply and really are looking forward to the next phase together. Thank you all.
Thank you.